that we have known the what and why for the longest time. There's no dearth of policy prescriptions. Everything has to do now about implementation and execution, and therefore the how part of it. And the way these discussions happened earlier on in the year with respect to climate change, I sincerely hope that in the next couple of days, as these sessions move forward, we will, and all of you will come back with the how part of it. And I'd learned it, I mentioned it in an earlier session a few weeks back as well, when after I took oath and I went for the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, and I was asked to come in and join Finance Ministers Coalition for Climate Change. तो मेरा पहला ज़हन में ये गया कि फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स का क्या ताल्लुक है इस सारी चीज़ से. But the reality is, when I went there, and whether it's the OECD finance ministers or they were from the emerging markets, it was quite clear that while the ministers of climate change, and in today's context, the Minister of Health and Minister of Population Welfare are the folks who are going to lead, but it's really the finance ministers which make it and take it mainstream. If we are not making it part of our budgeting process, if we are not making it part of our planning process, then it remains an academic discussion. So I look forward to getting the views on the how part of it when it comes to population. और मैं अगर सारे sessions देखूं, so I do think almost every possible element has been covered, including at times areas from which we shy from, which is the religious part of it. But Maulana Usmani and Mufti Usmani being here, and I was here when Minister for Health asked him to join us a couple of months back. और उस वक्त मुफ्ती उस्मानी ने different fatwas वो लेकर आए थे और उन्होंने बड़ी डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन किया था. And I'm hoping and assuming कि inshallah when he comes here as part of his session, he will do a repeat of that this has nothing to do with religion. तो इसलिए हमें उस टॉपिक से और उस चीज़ से हमें आगे बढ़ना है, बिकॉज जब हमारे बड़े जो मोतबर लोग हैं जो इस सारी चीज़ को लीड कर रहे हैं, तो वो अब आप सुनेंगे. बट आई वॉज वेरी इनकरेज्ड विद दैट डिस्कशन बिकॉज वी कैन नॉट shy away from action because some of these elements, hold us back. With respect to the economy, I had a very detailed press conference yesterday, so I'm not going to go into that. In fact, a month back, with my very honorable cabinet colleagues, we also had a very detailed session with the press with respect to structural reforms, whether it's taxation, whether it's energy, SOEs, privatization, right-sizing, pension reforms, etc. But few things are very clear. Whether it's the climate change, whatever we do in terms of how we are going to move from stabilization to inclusive and sustainable growth, the GDP does suffer. The flooding this year is going to shave off roughly 0.5% from our GDP growth forecast. So it's real. And with respect to population, the real GDP growth number, wherever we grow, whichever nominal GDP number we get to, is clearly going to be a dampener if we don't manage it and if we don't control it. In that context, it's not only about the economy that we live in today, it's also about the new economy. Because when we talk about the population dividend and with 64% of our population under the age of 30, this is not about governments giving jobs. I think we have to get out of that mindset. It's the ladies and gentlemen who are freelancers today. It's the ladies and gentlemen who are leading our IT services. Ladies and gentlemen who are leading our IT economy at this point in time. We need to upskill them. We need to reskill them. That's how we are going to go forward with respect to this population dividend. और उसमें AI, digital infrastructure, blockchain, Web 3.0. मैं अभी अली चीमा साहब को अभी ये कह रहा था कि इनको मैं मुबारक दे रहा था कि a Pakistani who has done, American Pakistani, who has done extremely well for himself. And I had the privilege of meeting him in New York on the sidelines of UNGA, who has donated money at your institution to set up blockchain. Agar aaj hamare bachche aur bachchiyan, they are writing codes at $2, $3, $4 per hour. And if they come up the curve through your institution, sir, and other institutions, as we scale it up, and if they can start writing codes at $12, $13 per hour, they help themselves and they help the country. So the new economy is very, very important. Whether it's, as I said, AI, digital infrastructure, Web 3.0, blockchain, crypto, as we go forward. And I mention it because we keep on talking about how we're going to grow our economy, but the latest chain analysis shows that we are now, as a country, number 3 in terms of crypto participation. We used to be number 10, we are now number 7, and now we're number 3. And it's very important in the context of population, it's very important in the context of youth, because all of us, or most of us, I see a lot of young men and women here, don't take me wrong, but a lot of us are going to fade away. It's this population which is going to lead the country, and therefore having the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority so that we can take this discussion forward for the young ladies and gentlemen who are participating in this activity, but in a regulated way. Now, 2.55% is a statistics. I'm sure all the speakers before me must have talked about it. And I'm sure Country Director Bolormaa is going to talk about this from a World Bank perspective as well. But the issues related to that 2.55%, if we just leave the GDP number outside, 40% of Pakistani children under the age of 5 stunted. Now, this is intellectual poverty. This is our future workforce. This is the future leadership of Pakistan, which, as they enter with a handicap, which we can ill afford. The second one is learning poverty, especially girls out of school. And again, every study, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's others, everything that has been talked about is the women participation in the workforce. And therefore, getting these young women back into schools so that they become part of the productive workforce, inshallah, as we go forward. I think the point that Dr. Arif, if I understand correctly, I was just listening to you, and you're absolutely right, because a lot of our premises is based on the fact that if at times we say that 39% of Pakistan is urban, the reality is urbanization has been on the rise. And I do believe that roughly 88% of our population now lives in areas with urban characteristics. And therefore, the context of urban poor, and therefore, ये डॉक्टर साहबा मैंने आपके भी सेशन में ये मैंने बात की थी कि पॉपुलेशन काउंसिल को भी इस पे ज़रा फोकस करना चाहिए, because in the Kachi Abadis, the failure of water, sanitation, hygiene, I think it's going to be very, very critical. Because when I talk about stunting, the reality is we have done interventions on the food side. But the reality is that all of this comes together, whether it's sanitation, is clean water, is spacing between the childbirths. If we want to address stunting, we'll have to do it in a very, very comprehensive way as we go forward. और फिर जो इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस है उसकी हम पहले बात कर चुके हैं कि अगर पॉपुलेशन डिक्रीज होती है उसका कार्बन एमिशंस में although from our perspective is very much around adaptation, but still everything that we need to do in terms of contributing to emissions coming down is also critical. Now, how do we take it forward? Because हर जगह ये बात होती है कि the how part also needs financing. And I think as the finance minister, I would be remiss if I don't talk about how we do and how we finance this transition. Well, I will start with the multilateral support and the support especially from ADB, and then with President Ajay Banga and the 10-year country partnership framework. Now, this is a $20 billion commitment over the next 10 years. Every year, the World Bank has committed $2 billion of help and support and assistance. There are 6 agenda items around that $2 billion support. 4 out of 6 deal with existential issues: climate change and population. And within population, I've just mentioned the learning poverty and the stunting bit. I'm sure the country director will expand on that in terms of what they are going to fund, and the ball is in our court to come up with investable, bankable projects and schemes, and therefore looking forward on the how part of it from this August gathering. The second is what is in our control, and I do think that's very, very important, because for everything we cannot run to our multilateral partners. For everything we cannot run to international donors. It's not about ego, it's not even about dignity. It's about the resources that we have and making sure that we repurpose these resources and this funding for what we really require in this country, starting with the flooding. So there was a big discussion whether we should go into an international appeal right away. And the government and the Prime Minister decided we are not going to do that, and I think he was absolutely right. Because we have negotiated in terms of rescue and relief. अगर हम वो भी नहीं कर सकते अपनी resources के साथ, इतना बड़ा मुल्क है, 24 करोड़ का ये मुल्क है, ये न्यूक्लियर कंट्री है, and every time कोई एक आफत आती है और उसमें हम फौरी तौर पे भागते जाएं बाहर, ये मुनासिब नहीं है. And I think the provinces and the Federation have shown that we can fund the rescue and relief. और आगे rehabilitation और reconstruction की बात होगी, जहाँ वो है, हमारे already funding available है, because we cannot continue to take loans to fund these situations. कोई grant आती है तो ज़रूर आए और हम उसको लेंगे, लेकिन ये जो funding और जो financing है और loans लेके इसको हम आगे नहीं लेके जा सकते. So I think in that context, using our own resources is going to be very critical. इसमें NFC की भी अब बात होती है, और I'm sure during the course of a couple of days this is going to come up. This is not about us against you or against them or whatever. ये तो सारी चीज़ वैसी consensus के साथ आगे चलनी है. And part of that is horizontal indices, including the population part of it. And therefore, I look forward to very constructive discussions, inshallah, with the chief ministers, the finance ministers, during the course of this week and as we take forward. And I'm very sanguine कि जिस तरह हमने पिछले साल National Fiscal Pact को साइन किया था, और ये फेडरेशन और सूबों की मुशावरत के साथ ये हुआ था. तो इसलिए हम इसको बिल्कुल कंसेंसस के साथ इंशाल्लाह आगे लेकर चलेंगे. But this is about self-reliance and self-funding. And the last thing I just want to mention, because I'm also conscious of time, because other speakers have to talk as well, that this has to go beyond our immediate resources. Private-public partnership. I think is going to be absolutely critical as we go forward. So in that context, the social impact financing framework, which has now been established, and I'm sure Country Director of World Bank is going to talk about it as well. This time around, whichever funding resource we are using, it has to be linked with outcomes. It's not about tracking dollars spent, because we've had enough dollars. We have had enough dollars, and we've had billions of dollars coming in, but there's not much to show. And therefore, it has to be linked with outcomes. And therefore, from the government perspective, we need to be held accountable in terms of where this money is being spent and how this is being spent. And so from that perspective, it's also with respect to the social impact financing framework, the Pakistan Skills Impact Bond. And I feel very strongly about it because this is about NAVTEC and upskilling and reskilling our young men and women in terms of how we take it forward. And High Commissioner, I'm very grateful to the support that the British Asian Trust and the technical assistance funding that we have received from FCDO. So we greatly appreciate what you have contributed to this. And the first Pakistan Skills Impact Bond, inshallah, should be issued in the coming days. So with that, I just want to again thank the Dawn Media Group for organizing such an important conference, and all the practitioners, all the subject matter experts who are here. I look forward, and the government looks forward to being guided by you. Thank you very much.
We would like to extend our gratitude to Senator Aurangzeb for his address and taking out the time to join us today. We would now like to invite Her Excellency Jane Marriott, CBG, CMG, OBE, British High Commissioner to Pakistan, to deliver her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Finance Minister, Senator Rahman, all of you in the room who have been caring and working on all of these issues for a very long time. Thank you very much. Seeing the huge numbers today, the fact that it's standing room only, has really given me great heart that this is the potential to be a turning point on this issue. And I really, really commend Dawn Media, as many have before me, for their work on this and on climate change. These are the long-term issues, but they need action today. And I have to say I was slightly depressed by the brilliant presentation from the Population Council showing where we would have been had we done what was agreed in 2002. And many of you will be familiar with the concept of the 1 degree rule. And this initially applied to aeroplanes. You're flying, you get in an aeroplane, you are 1 degree off course. That doesn't sound very much, 1 degree off course. Within an hour of flying, you are a mile away from your intended destination. This is why policy interventions on things like climate change, on population, are really living proof of why the 1 degree rule matters. Because if we had followed the Population Council and others' guidance in 2002, we would be having a very different conference today. So my main wish, and I think the main wish of all of us today, is that coming out of this conference and the recommendations from this, that we are not having a conference in 2040 where some of the younger people towards the back of the audience will be the speakers on this stage lamenting that we didn't do anything in 2025, or we'll be a very different place today, 2040. So let's learn from the past and let's make a much better future together. Now, this is a panel about the economy. And it's very easy, whether you're talking about climate or population, to talk about the moral issues, the environment issues. Is it right? Is it wrong? It sort of doesn't matter, because the arguments that resonate to most people are to do with the economies, they're to do with business. So I'm very much in favour of actually not talking about the moral picture, but about talking about the pragmatics and the economy. We've already heard that every year the population equivalent to, well, New Zealand's gone down to 5 million people now, Denmark is up to 6 million, so I'm going to say adding the equivalent of the population of Denmark every year to Pakistan. We've heard about the high fertility rate. We've heard that 18% of women have an unmet need for family planning. I was deep diving into these statistics a little bit, and I discovered that that is a result of 50% of people not really expressing a view. So actually 32% of people have met needs, 18% of people have unmet needs, and 50% haven't really articulated what those needs are. And I think it's not clear whether that's because those needs are being met or because they don't know what it is that they can articulate. What we do know is that ground-to-ground interventions are crucial, and Senator Rehman was just reminding me that where we saw real impact on these numbers was with the lady health workers and the fact that you had women going door to door, having conversations with women who wanted to space out their families, who wanted to understand this. One of the most heart-rending moments I ever had was actually over a decade ago when I was ambassador in Yemen, and I went to very, very remote rural areas. And some of the women there had had 20 babies, over half of whom had died, of course. And they said to me, what we need is family planning. Our number one request is family planning. Women in rural areas, they may not have formal education, but they know what they need if they're given the opportunity to articulate it and to receive it. We've heard about the 2.55% per year of current population growth. We know that to keep pace with this growth, Pakistan, by 2050, is going to need 68 million additional jobs. So not just the jobs that we need now, an extra 68 million additional jobs. That is a staggering number. 150,000 new schools and nearly 700,000 new additional teachers, as well as the massive investments in health, housing, and infrastructure. Those are absolutely staggering numbers. This is the issue that defines every other issue in Pakistan over the next few decades. And we also know that climate vulnerability compounds these challenges. But we've also heard that there is a different path, and that if Pakistan reduces its annual population growth rate to 1.2% by 2030, 2030 is just round the corner. It is 5 years away. That is nothing, but it is still doable, as we've heard. So if the growth rate can be reduced to 1.2% by 2030, then the population trajectory will stabilise. There will be 65 million fewer people by 2050, so there will be less stress on jobs, on schools, and on health facilities. We know that Pakistan's GDP growth rate will be 50% higher. We know that per capita income can more than double by 2050 in this scenario, and more households will move above the poverty line. It sort of begs the question, why wouldn't we do this? Not why would we, but why wouldn't we do this? And under the leadership of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, Pakistan has been able to achieve macroeconomic stability. But unchecked population growth will threaten to erase all of these gains. So it's not optional, it's economically imperative. You may wonder why the UK is standing on the stage, and my colleague Sam was on the panel beforehand. That's because the UK has always been a long-term partner of Pakistan on population issues. We stand with Pakistan to help achieve sustainable population growth, to offer family planning choices, and build a fast-growing, equitable economy. Through our flagship family planning programme, we've worked with the government of Pakistan for nearly a decade now, reaching 11 million family planning users and averting over 5,000 pregnancy-related maternal deaths. These results show what is possible when partnerships deliver results. We welcome the Prime Minister's recent directive exempting family planning products from all taxes, and we are hoping that the Finance Minister will ensure this is implemented very soon. We welcome the parliamentary resolution calling for increased access to quality and affordable family planning services. And I particularly welcome, because we've referenced a couple of times already the role of Islam, the role of the Maullanas, but actually the Council of Islamic Ideology has already endorsed the concept of birth spacing. That's a really, really important principle. Looking ahead, the UK is supporting a national family planning awareness campaign which will dispel myths about modern family planning methods and provide medically accurate advice to help with family planning. And at the centre of this, as we've already heard from the Population Council, will be Pakistan's narrative on Tawazun, the importance of achieving this balance between rights and responsibilities. Beyond family planning, we've supported education for over a year, helping educate 5 million children, half of whom have been girls, to access education, and have supported campaigns against child marriage and gender-based violence, which have reached over 34 million people in the last couple of years. The Finance Minister has already given a few shout-outs to the World Bank, and absolutely the World Bank and the IMF are playing a crucial role to help stabilise Pakistan with its key economic reforms. So when we talk about population, we're talking about people's lives, we're talking about family planning choices, an increasing contraceptive prevalence from 34 to 50%, as set out in the last National Action Plan, could save more than 200,000 mothers and children. My favourite economic statistic, if you only remember one, remember this: investing $1 now delivers about $120 worth of savings in health and economic benefits. So I want to thank you all for being here today, for putting families at the heart of the population discussion, for putting economics at the heart of the population discussion. And achieving all of this together is possible, but it requires political will, it requires implementation, and I think based on what I'm seeing here today and the enthusiasm of this audience, it can happen. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Akbar Zaidi.
Is in very, very sharp decline. You talk to any economist, and there are many in this room, and most will agree that all our numbers are going in the wrong direction. If you were listening to what Hanid Mukhtar and looking at his presentation, doing well, and in relative terms and in absolute terms, it's much worse than than has been over the last. That is population. Pakistan in 25 years, literally 25 years, is going to be the third most populous country in the world. And I think that's scary. It's going to be a poor country, despite what the finance minister promises and others have promised earlier, because it's going to be matched with countries which have far higher per capita income, far higher productivity, and that's going to be in the world of competition where we compete with other countries, we are going to be left behind. Next slide, please. There are two graphs here, well, three. One is consistent with showing, I won't tell you what they're showing, but if you've been following the discussion, you'll know that one growth rate is growing at 2.55, and the other has been minus 1% in 2019-2020, minus 0.5% in 2022-23. So it gives you a sense of where the economy is and where the population growth is. Next slide, please. This is a graph which has been circulated and published by the State Bank of Pakistan. It tells you where our GDP growth is going over the last 40 years. And it's only in one direction. There's been ups and downs, and there's been ups and ups, but the overall direction is negative, down. It's coming down, and it's somewhere near 3% now, which is something that we need to be very conscious of and take cognizance of. Next slide, please. Unemployment today is 7.1%, and we know it's underreported. I don't believe those numbers. It could be 20%, it could be 18%, but what matters is that it's the highest in 21 years. Even if we take the 6.23%, this 2021 is wrong, it would be 2001. If we take the last 20 years, we get a sense that unemployment is growing, whether it's 7% or 8% or 9%, it's growing. And what's troubling is that of the 6 million people who are unemployed, very high, 70% are illiterate. And the highest unemployment is in that region which we used to call the demographic dividend, which is now turning into a demographic nightmare. Those aged between 15 and 29, the highest unemployment is in that age. As we've heard, 3.5 million or 4 million Pakistanis enter the job market every day, with a growth rate of around 2.5% to 3%, 2 years negative, those people are not going to be employed. Furthermore, the real wage of workers of Pakistan has seen a 20% fall in just the last 3 years. That's Dr. Hafiz Pasha's data. Next slide, please. So when we talk about poverty, and we usually talk about income, but if you look at the Human Development Index of the United Nations, we see that Pakistan has gradually fallen in the last 5 years. 161st, which wasn't something to be proud of in 2020, 164th in 2023, and now we are 168th lowest in 2025. These are trends which are extremely worrying. I mean, there's something that we need to do something very substantial about. Next slide, please. Economists in this room, Ali Cheema being one and others, we talk about the notion of property rights. When we talk about growth, we talk about private capital as well, which the finance minister spoke about. Property rights are central to how an economy functions. And for that, a judiciary is central. If you see the IMF report last week, it talks about the judicial sector. I won't read it out because maybe some judges here might take offense. But this is from the IMF report. It shows that the judiciary is consistently identified as one of the most corrupt state functions. In an economy where property rights, the private sector, where international juridical concerns matter, a judiciary which is seen as being the way it's seen here is something which is very worrying. Perhaps the 27th Amendment will fix that, but I don't know. Next slide, please. Here's a Pakistan investment, something which investment to GDP ratio, something that Hanid also showed. What's important here is the investment to GDP rate is the lowest it's been since 1973. It's 12.9% here. It was about 12.7% at that time. So in 50 years, our investment to GDP rate has been falling. There have been ups and downs, but consistently today, it's the lowest it's been in 50 years. Next, please. Next slide. There's a lot of talk about the new economy and IT, and I come from a university where computer science and IT, and so does Ali, is very important. But these facts will surprise you. Earlier today, Mr. Ehsan Iqbal also spoke about human capital. Today, we are half a century behind where South Korea was 50 years ago. Our secondary enrollment rates are at the level where South Korea was in 1972. Our tertiary rates, 1979. We can't talk of a new economy, of IT, of computer growth with these sorts of numbers. Finally, my last slide. Next slide. Where are the women? The Global Gender Report last year showed that we were second last amongst a list of 148 countries. The report this year, 2025, shows that we are the lowest amongst all countries that it has recognized. There's been a debate about the data, about the methodology, but I think it's something that we need to be clear about. And importantly, economically we are ranked in the lower middle income countries, and 16 countries are much poorer than Pakistan's, but the Global Gender Report shows that they are better than us. So it's not just about money, it's not just about income, it's about numerous other things. Our female labor participation, as has been shown earlier as well, is very low, and the access to finance is a major issue. So finally, what does one do about this? There's a lot of talk about Vietnam, Bangladesh, Iran, Indonesia, and even in the brief which was shared with us earlier before we came to this conference, these countries were mentioned. If there's one thing this government needs to do, and there's only one thing that this government needs to do, is put women first. Whether that's education, whether that's employment, whether it's security, whether it's finances, in everything. If women are put first, you will find that the population rate will tumble. You will find that the economy will grow. You will find that Pakistan will become a society, a country where we don't talk about decline, where we talk about progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zaidi, for your data-driven analysis. Now we would like to invite Dr. Ali Cheema, Vice Chancellor of LUMS, to deliver his remarks.
Honorable Finance Minister, Dawn Media Group, Population Council, development partners and colleagues. I want to kind of make 2 points. First of all, before I start, I want to acknowledge a very important change that I've seen in the macro discourse, which is largely coming from the Finance Minister, which is about putting population first in terms of thinking about the economy. And I think one of the important things about this panel was that we really dig deeper into how the two connect. So I have 2 simple messages. One is for the Finance Minister, that don't think about population only as a separate service to be provided in terms of the PSDP, but we want to center that as part of growth. If you don't bring the population down, you're not going to get growth up. And I'm going to build, it's a bit unfortunate, but Hanid showed a couple of things that I wanted to show, but the link between population and growth is really important. The second thing is, both in terms of growth and in terms of fertility decline, I completely agree with Akbar that if you don't center women, you're not going to get growth up and you're not going to get fertility down. But what I'm going to try and do is show you some evidence why I'm saying this. But there's a third thing. While I'm completely committed to the agenda of focusing on CPRs and pushing family planning, equivalently, if we can't change the structure of the economy, that's not going to create the necessary demand for fertility changes that you need. So I'm going to run through the presentation quickly, partly because Hanid has shown most of it. So I seem like the imposter who's sort of leveraging off things that are shown. But I'm going to add, and that'll make the conversation more focused. Can we go to the second slide? Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Okay, so this is a graph you've already seen from Hanid. The left graph shows you the divergence in GDP. I call this the 2 big divergences. And these are from our regional peers, which is Bangladesh and India. The growth rate of Pakistan is clearly diverged. The only important thing to add to what Hanid was saying is that if you look at 1980, Pakistan's GDP per capita was quite high relative to India and Bangladesh. And that is for 2 reasons. We got a colonial endowment, which was huge, much better than both many parts of India and Bangladesh. But also the growth that Pakistan experienced in the 60s put us ahead. But the second big divergence, which is that in the fertility rates, and you can see the top line, which is the right graph, is Pakistan. Then the middle line is Bangladesh, and the bottom line is India. So this starts at 1980. India's fertility rates were already far lower than Pakistan's. But, and this is the important point, Bangladesh was quite close to Pakistan, but if you look at between 1980 and 1990, Bangladesh's fertility rate actually converges with India, which shows you what the opportunities are in terms of rapid decline that can be actually achieved. But from Pakistan's point of view, we've had a delayed demographic transition. And that's, I think, at the root cause of it. We started with a big population, but the rate at which fertility is declining is just not sufficient enough to create the preconditions for growth. Can we go to the next slide, please? We keep mentioning this figure that Pakistan is now the 5th most populous countries in the world. What this figure shows is it's a plot of fertility levels given by children per women, which is on the horizontal axis, versus population growth. The shocking bit, and this is what the message I want you to take back, not only are we the 5th most populous country in the world, but amongst the populous countries, we have one of the highest rates of growth of population. That's the challenge. So we're very big, and we continue to grow fast. Many other countries that are big in terms of population, their population growth is now coming down to 1% or below, whereas we're big and we continue to grow fast in terms of population growth, and that is really the challenge. Next slide, please. Hanid has already shown this. The big question is, with high fertility rates comes an age dependency ratio, which is what the left graph is showing. Pakistan is the top line, which has a much higher age dependency ratio now relative to Bangladesh and India. So for every 100 working citizens in Pakistan, there are 70 or 72 dependents. When you look at India and Bangladesh, that's come down to around 50. Now, why does that matter? It's very simple. Think about two households. One has 8 children, one has 2, and they have exactly the same income. The households with 8 kids are going to have very low savings, and the households with 2 kids are going to have much higher savings. So they're going to be able to invest more or generate those savings for the economy. And that's the difference between India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, that our age dependency is high, so that impacts the saving rate, as Hanid pointed out. The right figure is just showing the net saving per capita, and you can see the big difference between India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Next slide, please, which translates into an investment gap between these countries that Hanid has also talked about. But the important thing is, how does it, or what's the knock-on effect on growth? And there is a nice study by the economist Asim Hussain, who used to be at the IMF, who basically it builds on work that he did in the 90s, but he's updated these figures, and it shows that basically the age dependency ratio explains about half to 2/3 of the gap in the gross domestic saving rates between Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. So our GDS is about 6.3%, and in Bangladesh and India, it's over 20%. So even if half of that gap is accounted by because of demographics, that means bringing demographics down can give you a boost of about 2%, 2 percentage point growth in terms of GDP, which is quite large. So there's a direct connection between population savings and growth, and therefore population needs to be centered as part of the growth agenda. The second channel, if you can go to the next slide, is basically the low female labor force participation rate. The big story over here is Pakistan, which is the red dot over there on the left graph, has one of the lowest female participation rates in its income cohort. So the bar is showing female labor force participation rates in countries with a GDP per capita of between 4,000 and 8,000, which is where Pakistan is. And you can see that our red dot is below the bar, so we're at the bottom end of the female labor force participation. Why is that the case? One simple reason is that care burden in households is really high. So if you look at the demographic survey and you talk to women about why they don't want to go and work, that's kind of something shown on the red bars on the right graph, they basically say that they have too much domestic work to do. So you're not going to get female labor force participation up till you can get the care burden down. And again, getting the care burden down requires sort of population measures, which will then release the labor force, which can boost growth. Can we go to the next slide? The second big reason why female labor force participation rates go down is basically because of fertility behavior. So again, if you look at the demographic surveys and you look at pregnancies and what percentage of pregnancies in different countries are associated with high-risk behavior, i.e. behavior that's going to put maternal health at risk for a whole host of reasons, the percentage in Pakistan is over 50%. Now in India and Bangladesh, that's gone down to about 30%. So again, the health of women impacts essentially both the labor force participation rate, but it is coming because of sort of frequency of pregnancies and challenges related to maternal and fertility behavior. And that's another reason why population programming becomes central to growth, but also to women's health. The next slide, please. The World Bank, in a very nice report, which I like, which is called Swimming in Sand, I don't know how you swim in sand, but you do, basically calculated the effect increasing the female labor force participation rate can have on growth. And depending on different assumptions, the projected growth is between 5 to 23%. So that's a pretty high dividend that growth can get if you can get female labor force participation up. And as I've shown you, getting fertility down is a way to unleash it. So we need to start to make these connections. But there are two factors that I want to turn to. If you could go to the next slide, please. Which is really about factors that are impacting both growth and fertility. Yeah, I can finish if they can switch the slides. Okay, can you get them to the next slide, please? Okay. No, it's the previous one. Okay, yeah. The first thing is that sort of mobility barriers for women are a big reason why fertility remains high and female labor force participation remains low. So the map, this is again from the same World Bank report, actually shows you a rating of different districts in terms of restricted access to public transport, which is the main form of transport that women can use because they don't ride around in motorbikes like men do. So the access to public transport becomes a huge thing. So if you look at the map, the yellows are where restricted access is low, and as you become darker and go to reds, restricted access becomes high, and you can see the map is largely red. And two things happen when you don't give women access to not only public transport, but public transport that is safe, is that the cost of becoming employed goes up. When the cost of becoming employed goes up, women are going to stay at home. So female labor force participation gets that bump. But actually, the opportunity cost of providing care work inside the family drops. And that means families can now afford to have more kids because they have care time available in the form of mothers who are not working. So if you really want to transform the agenda of both growth and women's participation in the economy, then making or centering public investment in safe transport for women that can reduce mobility barriers would be central. And I think these should be a central agenda of provincial planning departments, maybe funded or co-funded by the federal government. We can skip this slide. If you can go to the last slide. So the last big divergence is that Pakistan is the economic structure of Pakistan. So this is basically showing you a share of GDP that goes into agriculture. And you can see that both India and Pakistan, the share of GDP and agriculture has fallen very, very fast. In Pakistan, that structural change is happening at a much slower pace. If I put the equivalent graph for employment, what you're going to see is that the bulk of jobs in Pakistan are basically jobs related to agriculture or low productivity services. But these are not modern jobs that increase the returns to skill. Now, this is crucially important for fertility, because as returns to skills go up, people or families start to actually value the quality of kids as opposed to the quantity of kids, because now there is a demand for education, and there is now the ability to invest in education. So with the structure of the economy as it is, the returns on skills are very low. My friend, who's also a relative of Finance Minister Faisal Bari, keeps saying that the question isn't why you have so many kids out of school. The question is, why do you have so many kids in school, given that the returns of skills are not that high because that's simply the nature of the demand of the economy. Added to that is the right graph, which just plots the average learning-adjusted years of schooling. And as you can see, Pakistan has one of the lowest levels, and that basically tells you the supply of schooling is not boosting learning. So unless the growth strategy can start to create sectors where the returns to skills actually go up, you're never going, I mean, if I was a family, I would much rather have 2 more kids than have fewer kids and give them education, because I just don't see the return between those 2 activities squaring. So finally, how do we bring this together? The first thing is population has to be part of the growth agenda. You're doing absolutely the right thing, but center it into your growth agenda. The second thing is when we think about fertility, we have to think about the framework as an integrated framework that centers basically women's reproductive health and safety in terms of mobility. It centers basically both structural change in the economy, and it centers essentially family planning. All these 3 things have to come together in a strategic agenda around a population that combines finance, planning, and sort of health. And unless you can bring these 3 things together, you can't pivot. The last point, and it relates to this slide. We're all sort of so optimistic about the digital economy and AI, as I am, but the digital economy and its future brings with it a huge challenge of destroying jobs. So if the jobs that start to get destroyed are precisely the jobs where skills are, then actually the returns to skills are actually going to go down. And as the returns to skill go down, you're not going to have a fertility reduction from moving in that direction. You're actually going to move in the opposite direction. That's not to say that AI, blockchain, and the digital economy cannot be used as a pivot, but we have to have a very clear strategy about it. And that strategy has to tie the digital economy to jobs, not to growth, but to jobs. And I think there's a difference between it. You can have a digital economy that grows very fast but creates a jobless growth, or you can have a digital economy that amplifies labor productivity, increases the returns to skills, and then it'll be a funnel for not only growth but also for fertility reduction. So as part of this agenda and the growth agenda, you have to have a digital plan which amplifies jobs, not growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cheema, for your informative presentation grounded in comparative data analysis. We will now request Bolormaa Amgaabazar, the Country Director for Pakistan World Bank, to deliver the concluding remarks for this session.
Your Excellency Senators, Honorable Minister, distinguished panelists, dear guests, friends, I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you to Dawn Media Group and to Dr. Ziba, who invited me to this event. So Dr. Ziba mentioned the Population Summit in 2015. So out of curiosity, I actually pulled out her presentation at that time. And at that time, projections estimated Pakistan's population would reach 342 million people by 2050. So fast forward 10 years, and the picture we see today is much, much worse. The population growth is a barrier to human and economic development, and it interacts with the climate change, as Minister Aurangzeb very eloquently put together. And also, Senator Sherry Rahman mentioned water scarcity, food insecurity, and I would also mention malnutrition and poverty, which are factors are very important for the World Bank. I have only like 5 slides. So first slide was with Dr. Ziba's projections, and we see today these projections are much worse. Next slide, please. Fertility, we already talked about fertility, so I will not talk much. I would only say that we have seen different numbers. My numbers are much higher, 3.6 children per woman in Pakistan, and which is higher than in South Asia. We already saw comparisons with India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. But I also compared them with some of the countries in Middle East. Still, Pakistan comes much higher. And the numbers are different, so I actually stepped out and talked with my colleague and a colleague from FCGO. We need to come up with the same numbers so the policy makers like Minister of Finance and others in the Population Council and Population Task Force can have same numbers they can work on. But the conclusion is the same. The Pakistan's fertility rates are much, much higher than other countries in the neighborhood. Dr. Zeba also mentioned the unplanned births. From 12.7 million pregnancies in Pakistan, almost half of them are unwanted. So this highlights a critical gap between demand for family planning and the availability of services. And this gap has to be closed very, very quickly. Let me now turn to the partnership strategy that the World Bank and the government of Pakistan have agreed on. Yeah, so these are 6 outcome areas, and I agree with Minister of Finance. We need to focus on the results. So in this very selective country partnership framework, we only focused on 6 areas, and one is stunting, and we know that about 40% of children in Pakistan are stunted. And it means that children cannot learn. However, 26 million children aged 5 to 16 are already out of school. And those who are in school, 4 in 5 children cannot read the basic text by age of 10. So that's why we're focusing in our country partnership framework on reducing stunting and reducing learning poverty. These are the first two areas. The next area is climate change and resilience. Then we have investments in energy and quality of air. Then fifth area is more stable macroeconomic situation and better public spending. And the last area is private sector development. And as Minister of Finance already mentioned, this is an unusual document. In many countries, we have 5-year plans. In Pakistan, with the agreement with the government, we decided on much longer commitment. It's a 10-year plan, and we attached the number, $20 billion. So every year, we promise to provide about $2 billion in financing. And that's not including the investments from the private sector. We have a sister organization called IFC, and another $20 billion is expected from the private sector to support the implementation of the CPF, another $20 billion. So altogether, $40 billion for the next 10 years. But this is not only about money, it's about policies. And talking about the population growth, we also need to talk about opportunities. 60% of population of Pakistan is under 30, and I was sitting next to the ambassador of Thailand. He left now. He was saying that we have an opposite problem in Thailand. We have an aging population. That's the same for many countries, including my country, also Mongolia. So there is actually a potential for the demographic bonus or dividend, but it's a potential. It's unrealized until you educate people, until you provide them skills and jobs, then you have the demographic dividend. Until then, it can actually turn to demographic liability. We talked about fertility rate, but if we reduce the fertility rate from 3.6 today to 2.2, which is kind of average in South Asia, per woman by 2030, the payoff is enormous. By 2050, the GDP growth could reach 5%. All other things being equal, just reducing the fertility rate to 2.2 could bring the GDP growth to 5%. And that's 50% higher than business as usual scenario. You see it's on the graph. Under this path, per capita income would more than double. Today, the per capita income in Pakistan is 181,000 Pakistani rupees. It could double, even more than double, to 443,000 by 2050. And the cost of inaction is also immense, the opposite side of the coin. Pakistan needs 2.6 million jobs every year until 2050. Again, we have some different numbers, depends on the source, it depends on methodology, but we need millions of jobs just to absorb this youth bulge. So what are the key kind of asks, I would say, from this group? First, strong political commitment and governance. Dr. Zeba already mentioned about the golden age when population growth was more managed and looked much better than today. So maybe we can look up the policies which were implemented at the time and modify if needed, and then commit and implement. We need to invest and improve quality and access to family planning, and I will not dwell too much on this because the previous speakers and Jane also mentioned that the fertility rate, reducing the fertility rate helps actually to delay the first pregnancy, and the lifetime pregnancy number per woman also decreases if the fertility rate goes down. And there are, Pakistan's current per capita spending for family planning is quite low. It's 163 Pakistani rupees per person, which is much below the WHO recommended level of 465 rupees per capita. Investments needed for universal access to contraceptives, and Jane also mentioned that the need to not to tax with contraceptives, so they are cheaper and probably or even better free. And there are some excellent examples in the neighborhood that Pakistan can learn from. Bangladesh was very successful in taking the family planning services to doorsteps. So female health workers, which are also exist in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, they visit homes offering counseling and contraceptives, and that helps to bridge the trust, bring trust and overcome some cultural barriers, and that policy and use of health workers was very, very successful. Iran actually made family planning as a national priority by integrating premarital counseling into their health system. And every couple who is married, they have to go through the counseling before the marriage. Indonesia, where I was posted before, it's now the fourth populous country in the world, and I was a little bit scared to hear today that maybe Pakistan will overtake Indonesia in near future. So Indonesia dramatically reduced fertility by embedding family planning into their national development agenda. They invested heavily in education and empowerment of women and girls. By constitution, Indonesia spends 20% of their funds to education. So a multi-sectoral approach is needed to foster human development and economic growth. This means investing in early childhood development, ensuring foundational learning, timely school enrollment, strong literacy in numeracy skills. In conclusion, I just want to say that population growth remains one of the most pressing challenges for Pakistan. As Minister of Finance said, it's one of the existential problems that need to be solved. Family planning is not just a health intervention, it's a fundamental right. Every woman has to have information, access, and choices to make informed decisions about their health, their family, and number of children. Without managing population growth, sustainable human capital and inclusive growth will be out of reach. By investing in human capital, the foundations for healthier families, resilient communities, and more prosperous Pakistan will be put in place, and World Bank stands ready to support the government in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Amgaabazar. Now, with this, we conclude session 3. We appreciate your patience. We will be serving lunch right after the next session. We will now be moving forward to session 4, titled Translating Political Resolve into Action on the Tawazun Narrative. Our participants for this